So my name is Dana Wyatt. I have been in the AEC industry for, gosh, like over 25 years now, which I'm hard to believe because I don't feel like I'm that old, or I could possibly be working for 25 years so far. But it's true. I grew up in construction, worked for several general contractors, everything from a small family-owned to the very large Turner Construction, Skanska USA building. Depending on what coast you're on, those probably ring a bell to some of you. So I spent my life in construction on the marketing side, BD side, bringing in that work, getting out to clients like Natalie before the RFP comes out and getting that information. And, you know, Alan, trying to get those things accomplished and knowledge of projects before it came on. And then I started my consulting firm 16 years ago. So my true specialty with Marketing Evolutions is now the very end game in helping win work. And so that's all comes about through persuasive communication. And how do we persuade the owner that we're the best ones to choose? And even for Jennifer, you know, if we're persuading someone that we're the best firm, we can always persuade them that we're the best soap to buy as well. So all this should be very transferable, and you can connect the dots from everything you're coming on. And then we'll try and connect the dots too with how do you add this to the copy that you're writing. And so I'll try to, I appreciate everyone's insight, and we'll just try to connect the dots as much as possible. And obviously, if you have questions as we're going through that, let me know. So I'm going to share my screen because this is another element of, whoops, let's see here. I don't know if that quite got where I wanted it to. That didn't. So hold on here. We're going to try this again because I did not get to where I wanted to go. I love technology. You know, you think just when you think you have it figured out and it works, something doesn't work. Okay, so you should be seeing this just a blank black screen basically with the ways to persuade. So when we look at persuasion, it's all about the value that you add to that client, to that listener, to that person who will be ultimately that you're trying to persuade. And there's several ways to go about this, but the most important thing always to remember is what is the value. And as you're looking at these things, you need to always ask yourself, so what? Why is this important? And so as we go through these, we'll keep testing that back. But here's some other ways that sort of go a little bit deeper when we're really trying to look to persuade. That first one here is giving back. And I look at this as the number one, rule 101 in networking. So a couple of you that mentioned getting that strategy in the pre-proposal or out meeting with clients, or how do I gather and gain this information? It's all about what do you do first to give and not expecting anything in return from that. But by you giving something, it creates a social obligation with others, and others are more apt then to say, gosh, how can I help you? And so if you're looking at what is out in the marketplace, for those people that are really in that BD mode, trying to figure out what clients are doing what, find that networking group. You know, when I first started my career, I was from the contractor side. I had an architect on board, I had a landscape, I had some mechanical electrical engineers, and we formed our own networking group because we were all chasing the same type of work. And so by sharing that information, it really helped me stay out and ahead of things. And then if a design build opportunity came back, guess what? Those people would call me, Dina, did you know about this? Is this on your radar? Do you know, are you looking out for this? So this is still a number one method of the way I work. And I mean, when Courtney called me, this is a great example. Courtney called and said, hey, Dina, can you be a guest speaker? I'm like, absolutely, right? I am more than willing to share my knowledge and help others because it always comes back to me in a way. So even though we don't think about that as a persuasion tactic, the more we help others, the more those others are willing to help us. And that's critical. Now, taking this on the client side, because most of you are in marketing and we look at how does this affect our clients? You know, if you help the client write the RFP, right? What can you help your client do that they're going to feel indebted to? You know, being with contractors, can you help provide a sample budget? If you know there's a community meeting coming up, or if it's an education project, a school bond has to be passed, can you help that school district pass their bond, do some work to leverage and get more community buy-in for our project? There's so many ways that we can help our clients. Again, how can we give to them and help them? Because those things will come back. And when it comes to then the actual selection, guess who's going to be top of their list? Wow, I really loved Megan and Natalie, or Amber and Natalie, right? Because they helped me do X on this project. They helped me get buy-in. So of course I want to make sure they're on the top of my list to talk to and receive this RFP. Any questions about the sort of give to get and giving back first thought that we just discussed? Okay, I want to make sure. Sometimes I get in the habit because I do so much presentation that I talk, and I forget to ask questions. So I'm going to stop after each one of these and just explore if anyone's got any questions. So here, the expertise. People always want the expert on their team. And so making sure that you promote your team and set others up to be the expert is critical. So if you're out talking to a client and they're wanting to do a certain type of project, you can tee it up to bring in your project manager, a designer, an interiors person, whatever that specialty is, because like, boy, do I have the person you need to talk to. In our firm, we've got the best person that's most knowledgeable about this topic. Let me set up a meeting so we can talk further, and you've got that person right here at your side. Wow, now all of a sudden, their expectation of your colleague is always raised up here. And so saying, well, maybe Joe could help you out. And you don't talk about who Joe is. They're like, whatever, maybe not. But if you say, wow, Joe, I can't talk, I'm tongue-tied. Joe is the expert when it comes to this, something that they're facing. Let me set up a meeting, have Joe come in, you can discuss this project. They'll have some great ideas to help you through it. Now Joe already is this high level, and they've already walked in, and there's already a level of trust being built with them. Because we all know when we go to sell, you have to know, like, and trust that person before you're going to buy from it. So if the soap product is unknown, right? I don't know anyone about it. How can I trust them? They're not going to buy. So know, like, and trust before they're going to buy. So this is a way to start building that level of trust in the foundation so people are ready to buy quicker. So setting your people up as the expert in this and bringing them in at the right time with their specific expertise is huge. So to think about this too, for who was it? I think it was Kristen, right? That was talking about having to do new copy and add in information for whether it's your website or you're doing project pages or resumes, any of those things. This is where you want to play those people up and talk about their expertise in a certain thing and really promote those people, that expertise that they have. And this is where I think a lot of us fall in, is we forget to play our people up. But this goes a long way, like I said, in developing trust and setting that person up for that, that foundation. Okay, any questions there? All right, the next is then really starting to develop this thought of trust, because the more trust we have, the more persuasive we can be. And so likability, accountability, we've really got to get to that win-win to get the project and get the one to be that trusted person. So we've always got to put the project first. And I think this is, Alan is like, how do I feel guilty asking for something, or how can I go to this client and ask for something and not have it being self-serving? Well, this is the thing, because if you put the project first, it's not about your firm. You want that client to get the very best designer, whatever your area of expertise is, you want that owner to truly get the best one for what they need. And if you put that first and they know that, again, they start developing trust. I do this all the time. People will call me and say, Dina, help us select a database, a management system. I'm like, whoa, not my area of expertise. But guess what? I have, and I go up and I build the expertise. I have just the person you need to call. And I give Courtney leads all the time. Hey, this person, would you help them out? And I set her up as this expert. So when she walks in and makes that phone call, they already have that perception in their mind that, wow, Courtney really knows what she's talking about. I am talking to the expert here. And so then, and I'm not afraid to say, this is not what I do. And I think that's the hardest thing. And it sort of goes back to looking at that go, no go as you're pursuing work. What is really best for your firm, and not being afraid to say no. And we have to keep that in mind, because right now, a lot of firms are getting a little panicky. So maybe opportunities have been put on hold, things are happening, and firms are getting a little scared. When they get scared, they let their go, no go out the window. So do not let your firms do that. I know this is off topic, but we have to stay really solid and true to those go, no goes, because we'll be more successful. You're going to see your hit rates plummet if you start chasing everything and if it's not right for you. So part of that is being able to say no, but always being an advocate for what is best for the client and how can this help the project overall. And when we do that, again, we become approachable, we start building that trust. And it's another level of persuasion when they know we're not out for our own good, but we're out for the good of the project. Any thoughts there? Okay, the last one then.
I was going to add, to jump in there real quick.
Absolutely.
Dina, I can vouch for how great that system works of being set up, because yes, Dina's right. She sends emails and and is very generous with the compliments of, hey, I've worked with this person. I think that not only is that reassuring to your client, but it also shows that you have continuity or previous experience without having to give a proposal. So being able to say, I've previously worked with this X, engineer or architect or what have you, you're not only vouching for them, but you're already showing the client that you have an existing relationship of strength that can benefit them, that brings them value. So not only are you bringing them value in a new connection, but you're doubly bringing them value. So I think that, there's an art to the nonverbal as well, and it's kind of that extra added benefit to those introductions or building your team up, or definitely being genuine about it.
Absolutely. Because as you think about it, trust is the ultimate foundation that the decisions are based on. And so we're going in and they don't know us. They have no experience with us. There's no trust. And so leveraging the trust from someone else has in us is a great way to parlay that to a new client, especially. And this can be done if who's currently working with that client. I mean, that's part of that intelligence and the research when you're going after a project, is who else has worked with this client? Is there another industry partner that can refer me in? Or say, wow, you should really talk to these firms. They're really great at X. I mean, that sort of leads us perfectly to this last one, is being the endorsement. Because again, it's one thing if we just say how good we are, right? And you're gonna say, oh, I don't know, Dina says she's good, but do I really know Dina's good? But if Courtney tells you how good Dina is, that lays a whole nother level of respect that, wow, Dina must be really good because Courtney said so. And so really leveraging your endorsements. And this isn't just testimonials from your current clients and the things that you've done, but it's also about how have you solved issues? What challenges do you solve on a project? And being able for your people to teach them how to tell stories as they're in these persuasive moments, because a story about how we solved an issue is much more persuasive than just saying, oh, sure, we can do that, right? So really look at endorsements in a couple different ways. One is from your clients and the success that you've had for them, because people want, you really think about clients, and from a sales perspective, people always want the safest choice, right? They want to buy a product, they want to buy a service that they know is going to work and that's going to perform for them. And so that safest choice is very important. This third-party endorsement is a way that plays that safer choice, so people feel really reassured. And we think about this, we do it all the time in our personal lives, right? We're doing a home remodel project, right? First thing we do is reach out to our friends or on Facebook or whatever method to say, hey, anyone recommend a contractor to use? We do this all the time. I need my roof replaced. Anyone have a roofer they recommend? I want to go to a special dinner. Who can recommend a restaurant? We ask our friends for recommendations all the time. And of course we trust that, because it's much easier for me to trust something if you guys told me, hey, this restaurant's great, than just going on a Yelp review and having to ferret out, do I believe this? I don't know, it's getting really mixed reviews, whatever it is. And so really looking for those third-party endorsements, but learning how to tell stories. And this is really critical as you're writing copy. We so forget about the storytelling. We always want to just tell what we did. And I mean, project sheets are the perfect example, right? We tell the square footage, we give the price, we might give the schedule. It was completed in 11 months and it was this many square feet and it was this value, blah, 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 blah. Features, features, features. So what? What value did that solve for the client? What challenge was solved for the client? And if we can tell a story about this project, how we overcome, a flood to begin with, but we still got it completed on time. Or, as we were drilling down into the parking garage, we ran into groundwater that was a lot higher, water table was a lot higher than normal. This is how we solved that. We did this, we did that. It allowed us to do X. Wow. Now someone else in that same area that knows they're going to have groundwater issues, guess what? It's higher up on their list because you've already solved that problem. And if you've solved similar problems for someone else, you start to become that safer choice. And so do you see how this all starts now to weave and intermingle together? And so learning to tell stories, and especially telling stories on your website and in your copy, in your resumes, you just think about every marketing piece you do. Can you tell stories? Can you use one of these elements of persuasion in that copyright as well? Because that'll definitely help.
I was going to add to that. I think that one of the key, I'm taking notes while you're doing this for the blog. And so one of the
excellent
points that I put under that was, first, you have to know your client and know their needs. And
Right.
sometimes I think, to Ellen's point, like we as marketers go, well, I don't have that direct relationship with the client, so I don't know what their needs are. But if you read the RFP and the questions, they're giving it away by what they're asking. So I don't know if any of you are plugged into the My SMPS community, but right now there's a chat going on about diversity, and that our clients are starting to ask about that. And one person wrote this week, gave an experience that their answer was fine in the proposal, and then when they got to the interview, the client asked again, and the team didn't have stories or narratives around diversity, and the marketer went, oh, they asked that question in the proposal, it clearly is important to them, we should have prepped for that. So I think that really not just answering, copying and pasting questions, but really paying attention to what they're asking. Are there themes to the questions? Is safety really big? Is whatever those, nuances are. But I think that we can surmise more than we think.
And just to keep that diversity question going, we faced this with a team this summer, and we knew it was a big part. I mean, they had a workforce plan. They had several different, like, ask the diversity workforce question 3 or 4 different ways. We had to write a very special program for it. So in the interview, what we did is we told a story about how someone comes on, and this was a real person in the company. It was actually their project manager. And it was a great thing. If he was Hispanic descent, showed how he started as a laborer, and we flow charted basically his career path within the company to show people, like, we just don't want to give you a fish for the day. Our goal with our diversity program is to teach you how to fish and give you a career. This happens to be your project manager on this job. This was his career path and how he got into construction. And we showed that, and the clients ate it up and loved it, because now we're just not giving percentages or talking about, oh, of course we're inclusive, and not how we do it. It's not the features, but here's the outcome of our program. And so that's the big thing of persuasion, is don't focus on the features, but focus on what are the outcomes? What is the story? What was the benefit that your program provided for? And that's a lot of things we don't do, especially contractors. I'm going to pick on all of you contractors because I grew up in the construction. We're really good at talking about safety, for example, right? We all have a toolbox meeting, or we start with the day with stretch and flags, and we go over the daily hazards, and it's, and our EMR rate is 57, which is well below the industry rate of 1, right? Does this sound familiar? And this is how we talk about safety. Everyone talks about it the same way. But if we can tell a story around our safety program and how it prevented an accident or how it achieved something on the site, now we have a much more meaningful, and it's more memorable. So that's the other thing. If we just talk pure features, no one remembers that. They remember a story. They remember why you created the soap. Have a great story behind your background and why this product was developed. What's the why behind it? Because that's how you start developing memorability as well.
One place that my head went was, we as marketers have to sometimes pull that out of them, pull that story out, or coach that out of them. To me, that's also an aspect of this persuasion, is the internal persuasion of getting that out of your staff team or whoever your interview team is, or whatever that is, because they want to give you those facts so bad. They want to tell you it was X amount of stories, it was X amount of kind of concrete, it was X, and you're like, no, I understand that, but what could we put in our toolbox to help them tell us the story? Because if we just ask them for it, they're going to be blank stares.
Right. And that's such a good point. So I always sit down with my team and I just ask a ton of questions. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. So here's, to divert a little bit, because this will play into how do we develop that story. There's 4 basic needs of every client. The first one is save me time. Everyone's looking at, has some implication of the schedule. The project has to be open by a certain day, or we wanted to get it to bid by this point, or whatever it is, but time affects every single project out there and every single client. And so using that, when I talk to my team, I'll talk to them about, well, what does the time mean? Can we do this faster? Can we do this better? What ideas do you have to enhance the schedule? So I ask just the same question, but I ask it 3 or 4 different ways to get them really truly with the so what. Where have you saved time on another project? Well, how did you do that? Tell me how. Well, it's more than a 3-week look ahead schedule. How, what did you discover by looking 3 weeks ahead? Did you discover something, and how did you cut that out? Oh, well, yeah, then we did. So it's by being able to ask the right questions that you can get to the big story. And then once you get their stories, you have to sit back and listen to the whole story. And the first time you hear the story, it's going to be about 20 minutes long. you're like, oh my dear God, and you're watching your clock, but let them tell the story. And then you come back and say, this was the 3 points that really resonated with me. Tell me more about this. Let's zoom in on this. Tell me about this part over here. Okay, all the rest of that doesn't matter. This is about persuasion. We don't have 20 minutes, we have 2 minutes. And then you help them condense it down to what is the most impactful statement from that. I think as marketers, the best thing we can learn is to really learn how to ask questions and keep digging for the information so we get out those stories and we help pull that together. So the first need, do you have a question or a comment first, Courtney, before we
Well,
go
I was
on?
just going to plug Murphy really quick. And, Susan Murphy always talks about the power of open-ended questions, like the not yes, no, do not ask them a yes, no, or, just, well, how, or, when or why did that? What was the outcome? All of those kind of open-ended, there is an art to that for sure.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So think about these basic client needs, because if you're writing an RFP or if you get caught responding to something where maybe we didn't have as much upfront connection with the owner that we wanted to, and we're really struggling, like, what are the client's hot buttons, right? How do we read between the lines of the RFP? Like, Courtney says, if you really dissect and read between the lines of an RFP, you can really start to understand. And, we have to guess. So we have to be smarter about guessing what their needs are. So one, especially in today's market, it's all about timing to the market. What is that schedule? But schedules drive every project out there. So really understand the time. Okay. So the second need of every client has to deal with money. What is their budget? How can we save them money? What is the funding of the project? Is it a grant? Do they have to return the money they don't use? When is that funding becoming available? But the more you can understand where their funding comes from, the more you understand how that ties into their project. Like, we had a project recently with, 4 or 5 different stakeholders that all were providing money for this project. So it was this coalition, if you will, for lack of better things, around a water project. So you had the 2 or 3 towns that were affected by it. You had Colorado Wildlife was giving money. Our Trout Unlimited was providing money. So it was a restoration of a stream project. But we had all these stakeholders that were giving money. So that budget was fixed. If we ran over, there was no one else to go back to for more money. All these organizations came together. They pledged the maximum amount they could give. So our persuasion there was all about cost certainty. And that's what we could decipher from the RFP and from what we knew about the funding sources, is how do we get you to cost certainty? Number one, and this was a contractor, so how do we develop cost certainty during pre-construction? And then during construction, how do we manage it so there's no overruns? And we blatantly said, there's no more money for this project. We understand that. So here's that messaging around that. And that was able to create a very persuasive message around money, because we knew what money meant to them and how money on this project was being utilized. So critical aspect there. So that was number 2. And you think about all your clients, right? I'm sure there's a price point with soap. We can only have so much. There's a price point for everything that we do. But if we understand the budget, for those designers, how do you design to the budget? Because your budget doesn't get tested until you get the contractor on board. And architects, this is a number 1 pet peeve of mine. Very few designers talk about money. And those designers that really understand costs and how to design to cost, or how to work with that owner's budget so they don't have to have redesign, or there's not a surprise when the contractor does come on board, critical for so many owners. So for the architects, how many of you actually talk about cost and controlling costs and knowing the costs in a proposal or in an interview? Only one. Yeah, there's a lot. Kristen's like, oh no. So that's another way to differentiate yourself, especially in the design world, is how can you get more your hands wrapped around cost, and how can you make that persuasive message to the owner about how you set up and how you make sure that you're designing to the right cost of the project. So money is always important. The third one is make it an easy process. And I know, at least here in Colorado, and the owners I've worked with, actually I do work across the US, so it's not Colorado by any means, but all of our owners are busy. And especially during COVID, everyone is overwhelmed. They are multitasking like never before, having much more on their plate. So as the AEC community, how do we make our owners' lives easier? And how can we show them another element of persuasion? Hey, we're gonna make this easy. It might be through web-based tools. It might be the way you communicate, how you track things. But there's all these ways that you make things easier for your owners, and we need to get better about talking about that. Again, it's not the features of the project, right? It's a very soft skill, but it's something that's very important on all of our clients' minds. And I'm going to take a quick shortcut off of that, or a side note. When we think about persuasion, there's two sides of persuasion, and it comes from the left brain and the right brain. So when we were talking about storytelling, that's all the right brain. That's creating those stories, getting the emotion side of things built up. But the left brain is equally important. And if we want to have the strongest persuasive message, it has to be a mixture of the emotional side, that my heart just tells me this is the right win. You know, my gut tells me I like these people. I trust them. They've done it before. I want to choose them. But the left brain then is the number of years you've been in business, your resumes, that project experience that you've done 12 projects, just like this project. So the left brain is the very logical part of persuasion. It's the numbers, it's the facts and figures, it's the percentages. And so when you look at marketers, how do we create the best message? If you can have both the facts and figures of the left brain coupled with the story and the emotion, that's when you get the strongest message and the strongest persuasive message out to your client. Okay, so thank you for letting me sidetrack. So back to our clients' needs. The last client needs, we have save me time. What does time mean? Money. Make it easy process. The next one is make me look good, because every owner has to answer to somebody. You know, if it's a K through 12 school, they've got the parents, they've got the constituents, they've got their teachers. You know, they have maybe the bond issue that was passed, all the community members. But every project has someone that they have to look good at, good in front of. And so we need to recognize who is that client's client, who is sort of pulling the strings from a higher level, who do we need to make good look good, and how can we do that? And so again, looking at the safe choice, I mean, we had a big thing that happened in Colorado with a convention center project, gosh, probably 2 or 3 years ago, but they leaked out some information. You know, the city looked horrible at the end of this project because the contractor and the owner's rep did not handle this properly. So that's the last thing you want, is your client to have a black eye. Again, coming back to that safe choice, how do we show them that we're the safe choice? How do we show them that we're going to make them look good? And a lot of that does come through from the success we've had on other projects. So anyway, just always keep those in mind, because when you don't know exactly what the client's needs are, you can look at those 4 basic needs and connect the dots to those. Okay, so we had someone asking about PR. That was Kristen from Arizona. Is it cooled off at all? Are you still having 100-degree weather down there?
It's very much still 100. It's actually a little cooler this week. It's going to get back to like 111.
So I'm going to make you jealous. I woke up and it was 41 out. Since I have my down puffy on, because I'm up in the mountains. I'm actually on vacation this week, and I forgot to bring a suit jacket or something a little bit more professional. It was 40 degrees out. So it was freezing here in Colorado this morning. But you mentioned PR. I think the biggest thing that we don't use PR enough for is establishing our firms as the expert. And so really looking for opportunities in trade journals or in certain publications that we can write about and really be a thought leader in a topic. You know, PR and social media has got to be much more than like, oh, we just got selected to this, or we're breaking ground on here, or we just completed this project, right? So what? What's the value to the public about reading something like that? But if we can put our firms out as a thought leader, you know, going back, we've had some folks in Denver talk about remaking a space now for COVID. So the screens, but how do you come in and redo an office space to make it safer for employees? So, but looking at how can you be on the cutting edge? How can you be a thought leader with your PR? And I think that's the key. It takes a lot more work. It's not easy. It doesn't happen simply, and it takes a lot more thought than just putting out a press release about, oh, we won this project, or the typical stuff. But it gets a lot more readership, and it positions your firm far more than just the, hey, we hired a new hire or a new project release. So that's my 2 cents quick thought on PR, but looking at it a little bit differently and positioning as a thought leader for a niche market.
Certainly our hope, our plan. We have a blog on our website, and it just doesn't get updated. And when it is, it's just, oh, we're going to be speaking at or we just won a project or something. And our new goal is, rather than having our own blog getting published externally and then linking to that on our website. We don't have a following on our website. We're not Gensler or someone like that who can actually have multiple full-time people producing content. So hopefully we can start doing that. I just need to start building these relationships, or we need to work with a PR consultant. So that's kind of where we're at in that process.
Right. Maybe even a ghostwriter, because that seems to be always the hardest thing when I worked for small firms, is who's going to do it. You know, and our project people have the best intentions, but they don't have the time to sit down and write an article. So interviewing them, asking all those right questions, and then having someone else write it for them, and they just have to edit it and clean it up, is the most efficient way to get that done.
That's a good point. Yeah, they definitely don't necessarily want to take the time to write.
And they're not going to do it. What other questions? I was sort of looking through my list when people were introducing themselves. Megan, I didn't quite get if you had a certain question or topic. You talked a lot about your firms and interviewing, but anything that you've experienced with these virtual interviews the last few months, or challenges you faced?
One thing I've been in the construction industry. This is my first step into the AE side of things. So the way they interview is much different. And one of the challenges, I think, is getting the technical person to speak with more authority in a interview and showcase kind of that personable side of that, because I think it's even more important in that virtual interview to be likable, and it's not translating as well. And that's the rub in this.
Right. So the number one thing I find there is work with them on their voice, because engineers are already monotone and deadpan as it is. We've all been around, right? We know this. I usually use a heart rate monitor, and I have coasters that talk about my tips for presentations. And one of them is being passionate, but it's all about the use of your voice. So just having them increase their range. We all have a range. Engineering ranges, unfortunately, are about this big. So if we can get them though to be about that big, just have inflection, understanding what words do I emphasize? Why do I emphasize it? And then just having a little bit more gestures. So in like today, I actually scooted myself, and this is a makeshift, I'm in a weird bedroom here because I'm not in my typical office, but giving yourself more space so you can still use gestures, because people get too stiff on Zoom, right? And they're close or they're leaning in, and then they're, like I can't see without my glasses, but right, this is what they're doing. They're looking at things and they look horrible. They look stupid, right? So what you want them to do though is to be able to sit back, enjoy things, use their hands, be communicative, and also visuals are huge. So being able to visualize, and you notice how mine, even though it was a very simple graphic, they built at certain times, because I didn't want you to see all 4 things at once, because you're always going to read ahead. And especially in this virtual market, I need you to follow me one point at a time. When I want to go there, I'm going to give you that new information. So we're in sync with all of those. And so the visuals are really important as well, to make sure that we make them simpler, but they're also able to follow them, because there's something lost in translation on a Zoom call versus when you're in person. You can point to the screen. First we got this point, next here, third here. Well, you can follow that in person. You can't follow that online. So you need literally one point to fly in at a time, and then make sure it's not a point, it's an icon, it's something graphic, and your team can just talk about that. But in voice, to make them more interesting and likable, make sure they're not stiff, make sure they've got good inflection, and they can be seen. So sit them a little bit further back from that computer so they've got a little bit of space. I also, with a lot of interviews, will make the people stand, and raise that computer up. So if I don't have a fancy raising desk, but I'll just pile up a big file box and then a couple books on top of that. And then so it's eye level, the camera's eye level, but then they can stand, which automatically gets them more animated. When you sit, you sort of get lazy, you start slouching, you start losing that. So make sure to stand them up as well.
This is meant to be funny, but also don't give them a swivel chair.
No, definitely not. They're gonna be going crazy.
We've done a few recent interviews virtually, and it took us a little bit to kind of get used to it. I think it has for everyone, but we had an engineering consultant who I adore. He's just such a really nice guy, and he's clearly very intelligent. We're lucky to have him on our team, but he was like,
oh gosh,
oh no,
the whole time. And he did it we do a prep, and I told him, David, I adore you, but if you do that in our interview, I won't be there, but it's not going to be good. But I think people have their natural inclinations, right? So he was sitting in the same chair come the interview. And I think when people are nervous, those kind of
they totally forget about it.
one of my staff was like, he looks just like my first grader. I'm like, that's not good. So maybe no swivel chairs, just as
No.
a anecdote.
Or bouncy balls.
No.
Yeah. No, you can't set them on a hard surface, stand them up. I had a guy, so we did a Zoom call. We actually did it. They had a pretty sophisticated conference room. So we went ahead and had people socially distanced. There's only 4 of them in the interview. So we sat them around a large conference room table, and the camera actually would zoom in as you talked. And so we had the marketing person in there, and she knew, we called her the technology specialist, or troubleshooter, or something went wrong. But she would maneuver the camera. So if I was speaking, it zoomed in on me, then it would zoom back out to the room. It might just turn and focus a little bit. So not a ton of movement, because you can get real dizzy, but just slight movement. But same thing, the whole conference room was like, we had a guy tapping on the table with his hands. And so,
and that's all your audience will see when that happens.
And he was the first one up in the view. So he was the closest one up, and then everyone else was sort of filtered back. Yeah, and so we did the prep in person, which is always far more effective if you can than prepping on Zoom. But I kept throwing stuff at him. And I just had a pile of my coasters, and every time his hand wiggled, I threw stuff at him. And it took about 20 minutes, but he finally was like, oh, I can't touch that. So even on the swivel, even if you're on Zoom, he's swiveling and go like, Joe, you're swiveling, Joe. Or you start moving a lot, like, whoa, what's up there, dude? He's like, ah. So over exaggerate things that they're doing to call attention to it. And every time they do it, it's just like saying The only way you cure an is to recognize you're saying it. You pause, say it to yourself, go on. But the swivel, anything like that, just go after them so they know they're doing it, and you'll calm them down.
The other thing I was going to add is, I know that some of our guys are opposed to it, but it really does make a difference, is the lighting. So even if they don't have like the fancy lights and the filters and all that kind of stuff, and they're all sold out now anyway, so good luck finding one, but taking the lampshade off and just having the lamp right behind any sort of computer it makes a huge difference, so that they can actually see your facial expressions or any of that kind of stuff. So I think that does matter, from us as marketers taking control of the situation and making those little changes.
And sometimes it's turning off the overhead light. Like if I had so this is the same group I worked with last week, the twiddler, but he was also bald. And so he was first sitting under a overhead light in his bedroom, total shine fest. So we did the same thing. We're like, bring a lamp from your bedroom from home, set it up right in front of your computer, so you get lit from the front side. It made a world of difference. We're like, turn off that overhead light because your head is shining. But those are things you can definitely help. And again, it's sort of to Megan's point, it's just those little touches. If they can see them, they're well lit, it goes that much farther to making them likable. And then no virtual backgrounds. I was glad to see no one with virtual backgrounds. And I actually had on one to start with. And I'm like, Courtney, what do you think? Because I'm in this weird bedroom. It's not my typical office. But we played around, but they're hard, because if you move, you lose an arm. And then it gets weird and you get halo effects. So when all possible, try not to use the virtual backgrounds unless their space behind them is just disastrous. Don't use one. What other questions? We have a few minutes left. What anything else I can answer, or thoughts about what was said? Anything that resonated with you personally today that was sort of the aha reminder moment?
I have a question on interviews with, especially with federal work. Typically the questions are very regimented and they ask the same questions to everybody to keep a level playing field. How do you work in things that make you stand out in how you answer those questions and not just repeat your qualifications?
Through storytelling. You need to answer the question, but then add a story to it.
Right. Yeah. Project examples and stuff like that.
Right. So if they ask, I'm going sort of blank, a question that they could ask, but I know what you're talking about, because they do have very set questions, and sometimes they're really stupid questions as well, or something that you've already stated. So you can never say, well, as I said in my interview, or as I said about, no. But just trying to restate that, but adding in a story to make it memorable. And so something that sticks out differently. And going back to those persuasion tactics, and even the left brain, right brain, can you add a percentage? Can you add some numbers? Can you give some studies or research that proves this point? What is the story you can tell to back it up? We get too often in questions, we just answer something. So have you ever heard of the STAR technique when we come to answering questions? All right, write this down because this is really cool. The first one is the situation. ST is the situation. So if they ask a contract question, well, being that this is a CMGC or design build, here, you know, here's a parameter. So you go back to the situation of that project or of the thing. A is the action we take. So if they're asking about, trying to think here, something of a contract or self-performing work. Well, given this is a CMGC, here's how we perform that bill. We always want to make sure that it's competitively bid out, make sure that you're getting the best pricing. So then the action you take. Here's the steps we take. We do 1, we do 2, we do 3. You're there at the bid opening, whatever those items are. So it's sort of the features that you guys will love talking about. Making sure they don't get too far in the weeds, but here's the action we take. And then the biggest thing is just as we talked about the so what is the results? So the results of when we do this, this is the result that you get. So therefore, we self-perform, sort of the benefits of the results. We can control the schedule. It's proven that we've gotten more price effectiveness. You know, in fact, on the last job we did on the concrete, by doing this and that, our price actually came in 10% lower than the concrete. And we were able to also cut 15 days off the schedule by controlling that with our own forces. So you have that storytelling and that proof wrapped into the end as well. So start off with the situation, the star, ST, go to the action. What are the actions you take? What are those features? How do you do it? And then are the results and the value or the benefit to the client. But that's a good formula to teach your folks that makes it have more of an impact. And it gets that storytelling in because they're talking about the results and they can talk about a similar situation where they've done it.
Dina, I have a question about kind of building off the previous questions about PR that Kirsten mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I made a list with my team. I have a really great guy on my team that does a lot with branding, and he's pretty plugged into publications that are relevant in our industry and also publications that are relevant to our clients. But what I'm sort of struggling with in terms of taking the next step is how best to approach those publications to submit, and in a way that will make it so that it's more of a partnership rather than us like kind of begging to have pieces in there. And I know that if we check the editorial calendars, they often have, you know, either themes or deadlines and things of that nature that give us a first step. But do you have any tips on how to successfully reach out to those publications in a way that would yield the best results for our efforts?
Yeah, sure. Now this is going back a ways because I used to do PR, but that was when I was in-house. So I'm not sure how much things have changed, but I always strove to make a relationship with the editor. So I'd call them up. I just wouldn't send blank pitches, but I'd call them up and say, wow, and then know enough about their publication. I really enjoyed this, or I love this feature article. You know, we want to make sure that we're giving you content that you can use and not have to re-edit, and it's right for your readership and right for your thing. So help me understand what is best. Is there anything out there that you're looking for? You know, I have your editorial calendar in front of me, but is there a certain, you know, something you're looking for? Is there this or there that? A lot of times they'll brainstorm and they'll say, wow, I want this. I also in my back hip pocket have a pitch ready for them of, you know, this is the latest trend, right? This is what we're facing. We've done this. Would that be of interest to your readers? And so by establishing it first, you know, remember our elements of persuasion, first give to get. How can we help you? What articles are you looking for? What goes over best with your readership? You know, approach that first, and then looking at ways, but have a pitch in hand, you know, we're thinking about this article, and it needs to have a little bit of enough to it that they understand the message.
Yeah, okay.
But I would have that pitch ready, but I would do that, again, it's about connection. So schedule a Zoom coffee with them, pick up the phone and call them. I'm finding right now in this whole world where people are working from home, they're much more apt to talk on the phone than they ever used to be. Because in our office, we're busy. We've already had the water cooler talk. We've already had the social interaction. And now it's like, get out of my face, I need to work. And we weren't as open to the phone. But I'm finding now you call people up, they'll talk forever. I mean, I have to really be careful about calling past clients or people because I'm like, I better have 30 minutes because this used to be a 5-minute conversation. Now it's, you know, Courtney and I did this too the other day when I called to check based on today's meeting. You know, we talked about our kids. What are your kids facing with school? What about this? We spent 15 minutes just talking about life in this weird school situation. And then, got down to business. So I'm finding people are much more apt to speak. So get on that phone call and dial them up and try and get a hold of them.
Thank you.
I would be remiss if I didn't share a former partner of our team, Danielle Gray. She is the content whisperer, and she will tell you that sometimes phone numbers are really difficult to get or to find when it comes to the editors because they don't want to get bombarded. But she'll tell you don't ever try to go email, but a lot of them are on social media. So drop into their DMs, and that she usually, that is her in. And if you guys are following her at all, like she's booming, and she's just got put in like People magazine and like all this other stuff. So like she definitely knows how to work the PR system. So that's another way to go. And I think going back to the chart that Dina, you showed, is that if you're asking them, what expertise are you missing? And let me help you fill that. Because they're always looking for experts to have on hand to get a quote. Like if they're covering a story about crappy roads on 35 here in DFW, then they want a concrete expert on hand all the time to just quote them. If they're writing their own article, if they're working on their own content, you want to be that expert in however many ways possible. Oh, I have an expert for you on such and such. And then, you know, even if you're making an introduction to someone else, like, oh, well, like I did a podcast, right? And they were like, hey, do you know anybody that does social media? Actually, I do. Let me have you talk to 2 people. You know, you can always have that expert not be yourself necessarily or your firm, but I think that that's another way to have a good impact on the direct message if you are going to reach out to them that way.
There's so much going on social media, and people do react in the moment. So if you can reply or, you know, comment on a feature and then follow up with a personal message or something like that.
And don't just think ENR. Don't just think all the industry. Get out of our industry too, because even mainstream newscasters are looking for experts. So that, God forbid, a construction error or engineering or a bridge falls, they want to be able to go to the expert and say, in your expert opinion, what happened? In your, you know, whatever that is. And obviously definitely get all the right permissions to be able to be that expert. But even, and that puts your name way out there in the public, like not just, and so your clients and owners and all that are out in that space, and we'll see you even more as the expert because it's outside of our little industry bubble.
Great ideas.
Well, I just saw the time, so we are out of time, and thank you so much for each of you